the significance of what these figures were here. So this is the red heifer sacrifice and the place where Yeshua was crucified, which was specifically outside the fence. So there's a concept, again, according to some of Ron Wyatt's research, there's the concept that Yeshua was crucified, Jesus was crucified on a hill far away. You got 3 crosses up on this hill. Jerusalem was somewhere else. We have this image. But according to Ron Wyatt's study, which again I can't authenticate, but which is to just say this is the picture, that it was actually at street level, right on the main walkway, where the Romans would crucify people, is right in your face. So it's not like way out there that you got to go visit this site way out there, but it was like right on downtown Broadway. Right there, 3 crosses stuck in these holes that are in the ground with a sign behind them saying what their offense was. So as you walked by, it's right at eye level. You're looking at this guy that could be you if you messed with the government, which is a whole different picture. It's kind of up close and personal. So the idea that it was outside the gate, it wasn't in a private space and it wasn't in some remote place, it was right outside the gate. Just like the altar of sacrifice was right inside the gate. So on the one hand, what this is a picture of is that the only way you're allowed in the gate is that you become qualified first. You become qualified because of the red heifer, the ashes of the red heifer. They burned the red heifer's carcass down to ash and then mixed the ash with water and put some of the ash water on you, and that was, you might say, a ceremonial or symbolical cleansing, but nevertheless it was a mandate of Torah that the priest cleanse with the ashes anybody that wants to enter into the kingdom. Now, according to this model type here, out here's the darkness and in here's light. So if you picture in the desert, in the wilderness, of course the wilderness there was not desert necessarily the way we think of it, but it was a place to graze sheep. So there was little sprigs in the Middle Eastern wilderness is a place with food for the sheep. It's not totally barren. But here's a picture. It's darkness. All out there. And then here's this white fence with the 4-color door. And then here's this other structure inside. And above it is this pillar of fire. At night, above the Ark of the Covenant. Now, just as a picture type, it seems to me that if this is like 9 feet tall, say, and you're like a 6-foot, 5-foot person, it would make this white linen fence glow like this lampshade. This white fence is glowing in the darkness of the wilderness. Okay, now that's a picture. So what happened on the first day of creation? It was darkness, right? And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the first thing spoken by the Creator was, Elohim said, Yehi Or, Vayehi Or. Yod, He, Yod, Aleph, Vav, Resh. It's translated in English, let there be light. And Vav, the connector, Yehi, Or. So it's translated, and there was light. Well, just to go here real quick, to show you one little problem with English and Hebrew. These words are the same. Light equals light. But we're told that this means, let there be. And this means, and there was. Well, the problem is, this is kind of like speaking a future tense, like allow this to come about, and this says it already did. But yet it's the exact same word. So what's it mean? Can they not tell the difference between past tense and future tense? So suddenly, based on this one word, you say, well, how do you read Hebrew? What about that word means past or future? How do you tell the difference? We'll get to that. The point is, when he said, let there be light in the darkness, it's kind of like before his presence showed up, there was darkness and there was a big white fence. And if there's nothing backlighting the big white fence, it's going to look dark in the wilderness. Soon as the presence of the Almighty showed up as a pillar of fire and the light came through the fence would look like it's glowing. So the idea of a glowing fence in the darkness is the pattern of the Mishkan Ket. I see lines up with the day one of creation. Is that pretty easy to follow? Kind of a parallel concept, theme. Now, let's look at the festivals. The first festival is Pesach. Now, what happened at Pesach is the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt. It was a time of bondage and oppression and restricted liberty. You could call that darkness. At Pesach, they were told, kill a lamb, take its blood, pin it on the doorposts of your house. The death angel passing over would kill the firstborn of everyone whose house did not have the blood on it. And right after that, it was the next day, that they were actually forcibly evicted by Pharaoh and told to leave to go to the wilderness to worship their Elohim. They were given liberty like a light in the darkness. That's the way I see Pesach. Pesach is the light in the darkness of the slavery, bondage, and misery of Mitzrayim, which is the land of Egypt that they were in. So can people kind of follow with that concept that Pesach is kind of like the light in the darkness? It's the door out of here. It's the hope. It's the breakthrough. Okay. So day one, as a breakthrough of light, all right, let's write this here. Tell you what, let me put that over here on this. Just to keep a little bit of a log here, I'll just write this.
We'll just need that. Nobody's complaining.
Okay. We'll write it here and then we'll... So day one, call it light in the darkness as a breakthrough, which is basically like the Het, day one, which would be like Pesach, which is Passover. Okay? Now, day two, if you read the Genesis 1 account, he separated waters from waters. He said there was waters that he separated and put an expanse between. So now there was waters above and waters below, and there was an expanse called Shemayim, or sky, in between the two. So there's a separation of two things that you'd think are the same. Water from water. So day two, which is, in Hebrew it's Chag. The word Hag is not H-O-G. It's C, that's where I'd write a C-X, or Chag would be the phonetic spelling, but actually what it is Het Gimel. Now, just to show you some of the way this book of Edenics by Isaac Moseson works, is that you notice that there are some similarities in the languages. So what is typically the thing you do at a feast? What animal do most people butcher for a feast? A hog, a big cow, maybe a fatted calf, but a hog isn't, we think in English, oh, that's pork. It might be pork, but generally, if you're going to have a little pork, but if you're going to have a huge feast, you might take the big hog. So I personally think that the word hog probably came from the word chag, which is the festival feast. That's a little bit of English. That's why we have hog or ham on Christmas and Easter, right? It's maybe where that came from. Lou White talks about Tammuz, and that's a whole other story. But Chag, matzot, the word matzot is where we get matzah, which is unleavened bread. So this is the festival Chag of unleavened bread. And what he did was separate water from water. Now, if you're separating something, you're filtering, you're straining, like going through a grate. So here's a picture of the kaf, which is like the filter grate. Okay, so if you take, you're not filtering necessarily two different things. Water from water is like two things that kind of you thought were the same, but now he's making a distinction. So day one, everything was one, and he made a distinction, light and dark. Day two, the waters were essentially one, he makes a distinction. Waters above, waters below. Day three, the festival, the third festival is Shavuot. But wait, some might say, it's not Shavuot, that's the fourth festival. It's Bikurim, which is the festival of, or the day of first fruits. First fruit, which is Bikurim. I'm writing it in English. Bikurim. Now, in Hebrew, an im or an ot or ut ending simply means plural. So a bicker, you might say, is the root word, and it basically is the first harvest of the grain. So what happened on the third day of creation? He took the waters, so here you have waters above, and an expanse, and waters below. And out of the waters below, he separated out the earth. So you have land and sea. Now if you think about it, it says he spoke plant life into the earth. He spoke putting plant life into the earth, but yet in Bereshit, Genesis chapter 2, he did not say that it sprouted yet. So in other words, if he's speaking the words of plant growth, what he actually put in was a seed. The plants didn't happen, it says, until after man was on the earth, because there was no one to, it hadn't rained, no one to till the soil, no one to effectively water, because the word till, you got to say, well, does that mean, was Adam actually out there with a hoe and scraping up? He didn't actually do that kind of work until after he was kicked out of the garden. What did he do in the garden? These are all other stories, but I'm saying you have to start reading things a little carefully, more carefully when you're doing Hebrew. But at least he spoke the seed into the earth. Now, if you think about a picture, you can't compress and mold water. Water takes whatever shape that the container is put in. But clay, you can mold. So for him to pull earth, clay essentially, out of water, it was Adam that he pulled out of the clay and gave it a shape. So here he's making another distinction. He's separating light from dark, and then he's separating water from water, and now he's separating land from water, and the land he can work with. The water, if you were going to do something with water, it's almost robotic. It'll do whatever you tell it to do. You put it in this shape and fill up that shape with water, that's the shape it takes. But water itself, you put it in a balloon and it just takes the shape of it. It has no structure, but the clay can hold a form. So he took the earth, the clay, to form man out of. In that he spoke a seed of life. So here he, you might say, first invented life, because that seed is essentially the element, if you call it that, of life into there. But a seed has to have a gestation period, right? Well, now, the thing about the third day, the word Shavuot in Hebrew actually means weeks, or sevens, counting sevens, counting 7 sevens, actually, and it culminates in the day known as Pentecost. Well, Pentecost is a Greek word. Cost is where we get the word count. Like, what's something cost? How many dollars do I count out? And the word penta, like pentagram, pentagon, is 50. So the word Pentecost literally means count 50. So is Pentecost, is Shavuot simply the 50th day? Or is Shavuot the feast counting 50 days? If it's counting 50 days, then technically the festival of Shavuot starts with day 1, which is Bikurim, which is where the priest takes the first cut of the harvest and lifts it up to the Creator and says, here we acknowledge that you're the giver of our food. You've brought forth the fruit from the earth. We're acknowledging you for it. Start counting 50 days. It's not working so well? Okay. Is it reading okay? It's just that when it's in the ear, it's... Okay. Okay, anyway. So, just for the record, every single list of the festivals I've ever seen don't tell you this. This is completely different. Every list of the festivals I've seen, Bikurim is the third festival, Shavuot is the fourth, the fourth festival. I'm telling you this for a reason. I'm telling you this because this looks like the pattern to me, and I'm going to try to prove it with the alphabet. So no matter where, whether encyclopedias, dictionaries, Bibles, Jewish studies, Christian studies, I've never seen them say this. But anyway, the gestation period is counting the 50 days. It's a process of counting. Now, if you look close at Acts chapter 2, where the disciples were met together in the upper room, what were they doing when, as the story goes, the Holy Spirit fell, there was tongues of fire on their head, the sound of mighty rushing wind? What were they in the middle of doing? Does anybody know offhand? Tarrying. Not just tarrying, they were doing something specific if you read close in the story. They were talking about the wonderful things that Elohim, translated in English as God, Gimel Dalet, we won't go there anymore, we'll call him Elohim or Yahweh or the Creator or the Almighty. They were talking about the wonderful things He had done. They were rehearsing and thinking over, contemplating, cogitating, reminding each other of the great stories that He had been doing for them. So, if one would say, well, how should we regard these festivals? And I'm pausing here for a reason on these first 3 festivals. It's because He tells us how to regard these festivals. They're not just arbitrary behaviors, but He says, okay, for Pesach, He told them what to do. Kill the lamb, put the blood, stay in your house, and then He tells them how to observe that later. And so the traditional Jewish Seder is what they have made out of that, which is a whole other story, but we won't go there exactly. The festival of unleavened bread, He says, take all the leavening out of your house. There shall not be found one speck, one crumb of leavened bread in your house for 7 days. 7 days. Now, here's the other thing. Traditionally, what the Jews do, which again, people can do whatever they want. I'm just telling you what I see. But what they do is that they call these 2 festivals either Pesach or the Festival of Unleavened Bread. They don't necessarily distinguish them as 2 festivals. Check out for yourself Leviticus 23. That whole chapter tells you about the festivals. It looks to me like Pesach is a one-day festival. Chag Matzot is 7 days. Shavuot is 50 days. The point is, for 7 days, you don't have leavening in your house. Can you have leavening on that day? That's another story. That's a whole other debate. We won't go there. But the question is, if it says don't have leavening in your house for 7 days, that's one thing. Is this the day that you take the leavening out or make sure that it's out? Typically in the Jewish Seder, they'll have a little ceremony where the kids go one last time during the meal, and they look around, and one of them comes back with something, and maybe the grandmother, whoever it is, will basically sweep it up and take it out. So there's something during the Seder itself where they're taking out the last little bit of leavening. But for these 7 days, no leavening is in your house. And the scriptures tell us why. It says, so that, this is in the writings, Yahweh says, so that the Torah will be in your mouth. You can say, wait a second, what does taking leavening out of my house as a ceremonial, archaic custom that when Jesus died on the cross he did away with it, what has that got to do with the Torah being in my mouth? I'm obviously mixing stories here. First of all, I don't think he ever did away with it. Second of all, it's a perversion to think that anything could do away with what he said to do. And third of all, if we try to mix Christological doctrine with Torah instruction, we've already run into trouble. And there's no sense trying to unscramble that. The word of Yud-He-Vav-He, the creator of heaven and earth, said to his people Israel, you will take the leaven out of your house for a week, and don't let any leaven be in your mouth, so that my word, the Torah, will be in your mouth. It all goes back to the meaning of the kaf, the symbol that represents that event. So, gestation and the birth, you might say, of the harvest, the first harvest. Mem, the letter, has to do with gestation. Mem is a womb. It speaks of birthing. So here you have a normal letter, Mem, which has to do with, basically, it's a picture of an open womb. See, there's an opening here. Versus the closed Mem, where there is no opening. So, Mem speaks of giving birth. So gestation is the closed womb where something is growing and developing, and Nun is that one who was the seed that was gestating and becoming, leaps out and becomes its own living entity. So there's you might say, a main event between these two letters. This, as I said before the break, this is the environment, and this is the one in the environment. This is the fish, that's the water. This is the one born, that's the place where it has been developing. Shavuot, 50 days. So these two letters basically have to do with the water stuff. These two letters have to do with the laver, the altar sacrifice, and these three have to do with that, and I'll explain that here. The yod is the hand that makes. It's the hand that grabs the tool. It's the hand that then speaks of the artist, or the architect, or the draftsman, the one who designs stuff, the creator. The yod is the hand of the creator who says, I will make this. I am making this. I'm doing this. And at the yod, at the end of a word, means my. So, ami, if you write it in English, you'd have like A-M-I. In Hebrew, it would be ayin mem yod. You could also have an aleph mem. That means people also. But this ami is a close-knit family group of people. This is kinsmen or brethren. Ami means my kinsman. So anytime you add the yod at the end, it means my. So the creator, the artist, who invents something and then signs his name and says, this is mine, that's all yod things, yod stuff. Yod stuff is making and calling it your own. Taking responsibility for, taking authorship of. So, the 4 colors on the door of the Mishkan. We were having a little bit of a discussion about this earlier. And blue, purple, red, and white linen, which is the fence all around. So typically you'd have maybe your name on the door, or you certainly say who it belongs to. What could this mean? So we were discussing at the break there, and one suggestion was, well, blue is kind of like sky, purple is kind of like royalty, red is kind of like blood, and white is kind of like purity. Pretty basic color equivalences. Okay, so in the commandment to wear tzitzit, or fringes, like this type of a thing, the Creator said, "You will tie for yourselves fringes to wear on the corners of your garment that covers you. You will tie them, and when you look at them, you will remember my words. And the fringes you tie will have one blue thread." Now, typically, traditionally, the Jews just wear white. Why? Well, the story goes that when they basically when they were kicked out of the land in the diaspora, the sea creature that was either a snail or like a squid that they got the blue dye from, it's called techilit, it's a blue color or kind of a purpley color, it ceased to be. So because they were kicked out of the land, as a kind of a picture of woe, they don't use the blue thread. Well, but I also heard a story, I can't validate it, but once they got back to the land in like the 60s, 1960s, there it is again, washed up on the shore, the creature's back. They could be using blue, but rabbinically, I guess, they don't do blue. They just have the white tying. Well, now it didn't say it had to be white thread, but it was made out of linen. So one reason for making them in colors is just for, that's one other thing, but it's not rabbinical. The rabbinical method is white threads tied, and what they do is they take these various threads, and they'll tie a knot, and then they'll do a winding, and they might wind the thread around first maybe 10 times, and then another knot, and then another winding where you take the thread and wrap it around 5 times, and then another knot, another winding where you wind the thread around 6 times, another knot, and then wind it around 5 times, and then another knot, and then they have the fringes. You can say, well, what's the big deal about that? Or the other way to do it is, I think it's 7, 8, 11, and 13. And if you count those numbers up, you got 15, you got 26, you got, if I'm thinking right, you got 39. Yeah, well, doesn't matter. The point is, the windings denote letters. And so if you have 10 letters, 10 wrappings, that means the 10th letter, which happens to be the yod. 5 wrappings is the 5th letter, which happens to be the hey. 6 windings is the vav, and 5 windings is the hey again. So if you have a tzitzi, which means that which flies, like just something dazzling, sparkling, and bright, that's wrapped with the numbers 10, 5, 6, 5, it's the name of the Almighty. Moses, in Exodus chapter 3, he's at the burning bush, and he says to the Almighty, who's speaking to him through the bush, he says, who are you? And he says, Ayah, Asher Ayah. When he asked his name, he said Ayah, which is Aleph, Hey, Yod, Hey, Asher, which is Aleph, Shin, Resh, and then Ayah again. It's translated, I am that I am, or I will be what I will be. But that's not Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. It's not a 5, that's supposed to be a Hey. That's not Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey, that's Aleph, Hey, Yod, Hey. But it's translated I am. So if somebody says, well, Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey means I am, no, it doesn't. Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey means something else. But yet if you look at the translations, if you look in the Tanakh, every time the word Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey is spelled, they'll tell you it's written in English, Hashem. Well, this letter is pronounced ha, and this letter is pronounced ha, but there's no mem and there's no sheen. This can't be pronounced Hashem. As a matter of fact, Hashem simply means ha, that's letter He, means the, and Shem, sheen mem, means name. It means the name. Hashem is simply the name. Adonai is actually spelled aleph, like an A, dalet, D sound, vav, which would be the O sound, nun, adon, and then at the yod at the end, Adonai. This means my, and an adon is a lord. So the word Adonai literally is translated as my Lord. However, they'll tell you that this is the way, when you read this word, it's pronounced Adonai. But it's not spelled Adonai. Why? Because there is you might say an injunction, a rabbinical decree. From what I understand, it's a death curse that anyone who mentions this name should be put to death. And from what I understand, it still stands. From what I also understand is that when Yeshua was put to death 2,000 years ago, it was not because he claimed to be God, nor because he claimed to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, but it was because he mentioned that name properly phonetically uttered. Because from what I understand, the law is, the rabbinical law, that anybody who mentions that name in the hearing of the high priest tears his clothes, and once they were torn, they can't wear them again, so he apparently lost his office at that point, saying, all right, that's it. Tears his clothes, that man is condemned to be stoned and hung on a tree, which is exactly what they did to Yeshua. They beat him, whipped him, hung him on a tree. That's the legal mandate for that crime of mentioning that word. But it's not pronounced Adonai, nor is it pronounced Hashem. Anyway, so you go back and say, but what of these colors? Well, if the color of the blue tzitzi thread, if Yahweh said, you will look at these fringes and you will remember that I told you what to do, then the blue color, in my thinking, speaks of the Creator. He says, these are my commandments, and when you look at the tzitzi, you will remember my words. I'm the Creator. I call the shots. I say what's so. When you look at this, you will remember that I am the Creator. I made this stuff up. I invented it. I sustain it. I maintain it. I say that it will endure forever. And when you look at this, you will remember and you'll do it. Because he told them to do that right after the event where he said, don't work on the Sabbath day, on the Shabbat. One man picked up with a high-handed disregard like this, gathered sticks, they caught him, they brought him back. What do we do with him? They asked Yahweh what to do, and he said, stone him, put to death. Then he gave them this. He said, tie for yourself these fringes. When you look at them, you will remember to keep my words, and so you will live and not die. So something about the blue speaks of the authority of the Creator. Also, when Moshe and the 70 elders went up to Mount Sinai, and they beheld the throne room of the Almighty, it says there was a work like sapphire pavement or brickwork, sapphire inlaid tile, as it were, on the floor of the throne room. Well, sapphire can be different colors, but is generally regarded as a blue color. So it's my understanding also that someone told me once, well, why do the cops wear blue? Well, blue is a symbol of authority. So if blue is a symbol of authority, and the Creator has it as his floor, and it has to do with the expanse of his domain, then there's something, in my thinking, about the blue being the yod, the hand of the Creator, the authority of the Creator, the work of the Creator is the color blue. Purple, the royal decrees. What are royal decrees? Laws, statutes, ordinances, commandments, protocols. This is what you do. This is what you don't do. This is what belongs in the kingdom. This is what doesn't belong in the kingdom. So what's the first thing you do when you come into the gate? Is there any stipulation in Christology or anywhere else that says you must clean yourself and conform to the standards of the kingdom before you step in the door? No. You come as a lost, penitent sinner who comes to the cross, gets permission to enter, comes into the kingdom. Do you know your way? No. Do you know what you're supposed to do? No. You come as a lost, forsaken, but penitent, wayward sinner. One who is in the darkness, who sees the light, chooses to come to the light. That's all that's going on out here. Once you come into the kingdom, now you have a whole different frame of reference. When you're on this side of the het, you're in the darkness. All you see outside the fence is this one that was put to death, whether it's the red heifer, whether it's Yeshua on the cross. When you're the man in the darkness and you're being oppressed by the slavery, by the servitude, by the oppression, by the misery, and you see this beacon of hope, when you see that there's a chance for an alternative, when you see the as it were, the fence in the darkness, and you say, I choose to go there. I want to go to that place of refuge. When you go to that place of refuge, that's all you're responsible for on the outside, is that choice to go from the darkness to the light. Moshe said, I put before you life and death, blessing and cursing. I encourage you, choose life. Outside, to acknowledge the Zion, the one put to death, whether it's on the cross or the red heifer, it's the vehicle of entering the kingdom of life as the contrast to the kingdom of darkness and death. Upon entering the kingdom, the first thing you do is cough. Cough up the hairballs, as it were. Filter through, process. Now you have to take off everything that does not belong in the kingdom and take on everything that is in the kingdom. Lamed. The word lamed in Hebrew means teaching and learning. It's shaped like this turnaround. It's repetition. Again and again, going over it and over it. Pushing, pulling. It's the shepherd's staff. It's the guide. It's the oracles of the kingdom. It's the processes of the kingdom. You step in the kingdom door not knowing, but simply choosing. Choosing life rather than death. A distinction made, like light and dark. Now it's time to separate, as it were, water from water. Well, this is the stuff I used to drink. You don't drink it in here. Well, this is the stuff I used to bathe in. You don't bathe in it in here. This is the stuff that used to give me life. Not anymore. A distinction is made. You have to filter, as it were. You have to butcher that animal, which is your own being. You see, the Jews think of the goyim, as it were, the non-Jews, the non-Israelites, as animals. As a matter of fact, if you look at high school and college teams, and even professional sports teams, quite often there's an animal as an icon of their mascot. We like being thought of as animals. Various different tribes have animals as their mascots. We think that animal characteristics are better than human. But if you read the account of creation, man was at the pinnacle, the epitome, the top of creation. To be a man is the top. To be animalistic is less than. But we've got things turned around. So to us, we take on these animal characteristics. The Goyim we're seeing people as animalistic. So when Peter had that vision of this sheep being brought down full of animals and told to kill and eat, and he says, not so. Never has any one of those beasts ever entered my mouth, and they're not going to now. Even in this vision, I'm not going to do it. 3 times that happened, and then it went up, and the voice said, what Elohim has made clean, don't you call unclean. Now, Peter did not say, gosh, that means I can now have pork ribs. Now I can have bacon on my cheeseburger. He didn't say that. He said, what in the world does this mean? And then when the Goy, the Gentiles, came to the door, he realized, I should not call these men unclean. I should not call these men we regard as animals as unclean. It had nothing to do with food. It had to do with calling the men animals. The point is, when we come in here, we come in, as it were, an animal to be slaughtered. And the only acceptable parts are retained to finish the rest of the process. Everything else gets burned up on the fire. for us to present ourselves as a living sacrifice is not necessarily in this place, though we've been told in the gospel, take up your cross and follow me, which is one thing here, but to come into the kingdom, it's lay your life on the altar of sacrifice there to eliminate anything that doesn't belong in the kingdom and take on the things that are of the kingdom. You lay it down, kaf, you pick it up, lamed. You teach and learn, lamed. You sacrifice anything which is not part of the kingdom. That's the kaf. Kaf and lamed work together as the altar of sacrifice. Therefore, if we learned, for example, that you can worship God any day, you can go to church any day, but Saturday is the day for fun and sports, and Sunday is the day you should rest, that's what you learned on the outside. You don't know any better on the outside, it's the darkness. But you come into the kingdom, and the first thing you read in the commandments is, you shall not work on the seventh day. And then, I think it was like 150 times, he talks, I think maybe that's the wrong number, but anyway, at least that many times, he talks about how significantly important the Sabbath day is, because it is a sign. The Sabbath day is a sign that you are in this kingdom. Okay, if the Sabbath day is a sign that you are now in this kingdom, and yet you willfully do not take upon you that sign, and you are outside the kingdom, does that mean you're still part of the kingdom? I don't know. It's just a question. If he says, step through the gate, I will seal you, stamp you, brand you, as it were, like a cattle brand, kind of looks like a paleotet, a cattle brand you as mine. Pesach, blood on the doorposts. This house is mine. The doorpost, the sign of the blood, it's mine. I see chet, tet, yod as all being the three letters indicating the door to the Mishkan, the door to the kingdom, the choice to enter between dark and light, taking on the brand, the sign, and knowing that he calls you, he who, the Creator, calls you his very own. And now that he is, you are his own, his hand will start working on you. So you have the tet, this round circle like a potter's wheel spinning, and he says, hop up on there, I'm going to start molding you into my image. What does his image look like? It looks like the kaf, because the kaf is not just a grate, but it's lines. Lines of instruction, like lines of the Torah, like furrows, lines in a field, where the farmer hooks up the ox and starts trudging the lines back and forth, furrowing the field, and then planting seeds in the furrows, and then cultivating the furrows, and weeding and watering, back and forth, and back and forth, and back and forth. That's the process, like the potter's wheel spinning round and round. So here you have the hand of work and the potter's wheel forming you according to the kaf, the lines of instruction, lamed, that you teach and learn. So kaf and lamed is, get rid of the leavening. Kaf, filter out the leavening, so that lamed, the teaching and instruction of the Torah, will be in your mouth, so that you will do it. Because if you do it, it's life, peace, prosperity, blessing, and abundance. And if you don't do it, according to the kaf, according to the Torah that he gave Moshe on Mount Sinai, it will be your cursing, your undoing, your sickness, your death, your deprivation, your slavery and bondage. So these three letters act like Pesach, act like the light and the darkness, the breakthrough. These two letters act like separating water from water, Hag Matzot, the festival of unleavened bread. Mem Nun act then as, when he gave his instructions, Kaf Lamed, he always gave one other thing, a promise. He says, if you plant this, which is obedience unto the Torah, it will sprout for you after it gestates, after it incubates. It will bring forth to you the promise of blessing. Mem, the promise of Nun, the thing sprouted, blessing. But if you don't keep these instructions, It will gestate, it will incubate, mem, and it will birth, mem, to you the noon of cursing. Noon is that which comes out of being born, blessing or cursing. So mem noon act as the promise of what's going to come out of what you filter and learn. So the thing about water is that water speaks of being clean. Water speaks of being baptized. And when you're baptized, the concept, Christologically speaking, is that you now become adopted into the family of... Whose name is on the door? Blue, purple, red, white. Well, if purple is royalty, the royal decrees, the royal protocols, the royal instructions. Well, the royal instructions are what the Creator has revealed of Himself, what He's said concerning Himself. The letter which speaks of that which is shown, that which is spoken, the way designated, like pointing, happens to be the hay. The hay is like the flashlight, the window, the light, showing what this is. So I see the purple as like the hay. That's why these two in purple and those three in blue. These two in red has to do with being adopted into His family. It has to do with birth. It has to do with blood. Egg, when it gets fertilized, you've got a spot of blood and it turns into a being. This all has to do with gestation and its birth, which has to do with blood. So blood here, the word Adam, Aleph, Dalet, Mem in Hebrew, where we get the word Adam, as in Adam and Eve, Adam. Aleph, Dalet actually means a vapor or a mist or a gas. And Dalet, Mem is blood. So man is a vapor of gas. He's like somebody who's here for a moment and then he disappears. Now, why are the women chuckling about that? They have a problem. They know men a little too well. Okay, so like the shape of the yod, you're there, then you're not there, you're there, then you're not. Kind of like a vapor of blood. A gas of blood, as it were. Anyway, Vav is the man. The man, red, of blood. And then white, you've got, over here, after Mem Nun, you've got Samek Ayin Pei. According to Micah 6:8, what's the bottom line of everything? The bottom line of the entire Bible seems to be in Micah 6:8. And it's not, be saved, accept Jesus in your heart, and you'll go to heaven. Why didn't He say that? I don't know, that's another subject. But the point is, what He says, He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what Elohim requires of you. Do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your Elohim, your God. Do justly and love mercy. Okay, what does justly mean? Justly means, according to my perspective of this, hold yourself to the scrutiny of perfection. You do the right thing. You make sure you do what you're supposed to do. Nothing to do with anybody else. You make sure you do what you have to do. Well, that's like the Samek. That's be the menorah. You be the one that bears fruit. You be the one that shines the light. You be the one that is beaten gold. Your structure is beaten and refined in gold to proclaim the good news, to bear the right fruit, to be the good servant, to be the watchman on the watchtower. What's mercy? Mercy is when the other guy, who should have been doing that also, didn't. He blew it. He ripped you off. He did something wrong. He faltered. He failed. You have mercy for him. Mercy is when he doesn't deserve it, but you give it to him. If he deserved it, it wouldn't be mercy. Do justly, love mercy. Personal regard, social interaction, and as you do that, you walk humbly with your Elohim, which Elohim is also translated as strength and power. So the one, might say, to where you find your strength to do those other two things. So the act of living properly, seems to be wrapped up in these three, which is why they're drawn in this blue triangle. Blue thin line like the tzitzit thread, which is like, according to the commandments of the Creator, do these three things. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with Him, with Elohim, the giver of these three commandments. So these three is what righteousness is. Righteousness is doing justly, loving mercy, and walking humbly with Elohim. So inside this triangle is white, which has to be, metaphorically speaking, the white linen. So if the white linen then was a picture of what is revealed in us doing what He said, if the first hay was the expression of the Creator, the second hay is the expression of the man. Blue, purple, red, white, in that sense, can be read then as Yod He Vav He, which is His name in colors. That was the other thing we were talking about. Now, if that's true, you could say, well, the Creator gave us His Torah. So Yod, Hed. When Yeshua was here, just before He left, says, I'm going away, but I'm going to send the Comforter to you to lead you in the ways of truth. So if Yeshua was the man, the red man, the man who on the cross lets us into the kingdom, the Het, then Him giving us the Ruach, the Holy Spirit, was Vav Heying to us. So one way to read Yod He Vav He might be the Creator's revelation, the Messiah's revelation. Or it could be one way to read Yod He Vav He is the Creator of heaven and earth, the giver of the Torah, the one who revealed Himself as man to man, and the one who, He, in us, leads us in His ways to Samak Ayin Pei, to do justly, love mercy, and walk with Him. No matter which way you cut it, there's a little picture here. If you're a marksman, the way to make sure that you're on target, there's 4 points of reference. There's your eye, and there's the target, and there's the 2 gun sights. When all 4 line up, you've got a straight line. It takes all 4 to line up. Any one of those 4 points is off, and you're going to miss your target. So the way I see this is that the things the Creator made, He then revealed, according to the Torah. And every bit of that Yeshua, the Messiah, would have validated and corroborated accurately, and also that He puts in us to do, is Yod He Vav He. They all line up. But when somebody gets a word from the Spirit, which is counter to the Torah, like, we don't have to regard the Sabbath day, that doesn't line up. Doesn't line up. Can't be the real Spirit. Or if they say, Yeshua, He did away with the 7 festivals. In fact, He gave us Christmas and Easter to celebrate His birth and death and resurrection with. Doesn't line up. Now, I don't know what you want to do about it, but if it doesn't line up, it looks to me like it's not Yod He Vav He. And if it's not Yod He Vav He, then who is it? I don't know. I don't need to find out who it is. I just need to find out whether it's Yod He Vav He or not. Because when Moses asked what his name was, or who are you, he said Aleph He Yod He. He didn't say Yod He Vav He, but he said Yod He Vav He is my Shem of Zakar. Now the word Zakar is getting a little deeper, which we'll get into later on, but it's Zion, Kaf, Resh, and it has to do with a weapon, a tool, or masculinity, or a man, or a memorial, like last name. The family name that gets brought down through the ages. Is his Shem, there's the word Shem, Shin Mem, and Shin is the letter I will get into just a minute for fire or spirit essence, and Mem is for material essence or water. So fire and water. This is kind of like this duality of fire and water. His double nature, one seemingly the antithesis of the other, the 2 voices of the Kuf, the 1 and the 0, as it were, to play another picture into it, is his Zakar. His Zakar, his remembrance, is Yod He Vav He. What does that mean? If He is Ayah, which means I will be whatever I choose to be, or I am whatever I declare myself to be, but I'm going to give you Yod He Vav He as my Shem, Now Shem is not just name. Shem also means position, or reputation, or fame, or what you think about, like the painter, the guy who paints. You know, that's an occupation, but it's not a name per se. But Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is not like George, Bill, Mary, Joe. It's his Shem of Zakar. It's his name or reputation, his famous memorial, what he's known as. Why did he give us that? Because he's the guy that made this place. He's the guy that explained who he is according to the protocols of the Torah. He's the guy that, Vav, I believe that means he appeared as man, to man. Man was made in his image. Wherever you go along with that is another theological, doctrinal discussion. And then Hey, the one who reveals himself through man, all of which, every one of those has to line up exactly the same. That's Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Okay. So if that's true, then this little Vav, you might say, in the Het, is the gate, is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. The one gate of the Het is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. What? Wait a minute, isn't that Jesus? It's Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is the four colors on the door. We can discuss how Jesus or Yeshua plays into that as another part of the conversation. I'm trying to keep it to the letters and keep it to this without going anywhere else at the moment. Otherwise we'll go off on all kind of trails. Just for what it's worth. People say, according to Paul, circumcision was done away with. It doesn't even matter. Doesn't even matter. Well, let's see here. We have the head of the man, and we have the covering of the head of the man cut off. And Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is his Shem of Zakar. Now, do you think that he doesn't care about it? Isn't Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh his own sign of the covenant? That he himself, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, is, as it were, his own circumcised manhood? Because Zakar actually is the word for manliness or manhood or masculinity or group of men, or the tool that you use to sow seed is the word Zakar. So, right there is embedded, you might say, a picture of circumcision in the word Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Again, more Christological doctrines that we don't need to finish going there. Zadi, then, being the Ark of the Covenant, what was in the Ark of the Covenant? The Torah scroll, the rod that budded, and the manna. It was the provision that seemingly came out of nowhere. The bud came out of nowhere on Aaron's rod. The manna came out of nowhere. They were up against the Red Sea. Egyptians coming down on them, hemmed in by walls of mountains, and they said, "What in the world are we going to do? We're trapped. We got nothing." Moses called out to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and he said, "What do you got in your hand?" "A stick." "Use it." "What am I supposed to do with this stick?" Now, the story could have read anything. Maybe he would have, thrown the stick at the Egyptians and they would have all fallen down dead. But what he did was he hit the water and the water split open. There's something about splitting open, which is a Zadi concept. It came out of nowhere. The fact that we read it in the story, we go, yeah, well, of course, that's what happened. It's like, the thing about the Ark of the Covenant is that it's a picture of he makes stuff come out of nowhere. You see a butterfly, you see a caterpillar, you don't make the connection unless you know about the chrysalis. The caterpillar turns into the butterfly. It comes out of nowhere. The thing about the Zadi is, not only does it not come out of nowhere to us, but from his side of view, that was the plan all along. The Zadi is also the archetype, or the icon. In other words, the Torah itself in the Ark of the Covenant is the picture of what man was supposed to be, could be, ought to be, was supposed to be from the beginning, and what is our responsibility to look like present tense. I've heard so many words from people regarding these things that, regarding the instructions, we don't have to. They've been done away with. We can't. We were never supposed to. He never intended for us to. It's impossible. Maybe when the Messiah comes back, he'll show us really how we were going to do it. But when he left, he said, I've given you the instructions. I'm leaving. I'm going to come back and see whether you guys are doing it. Will there be faith on the earth when he comes back? Or is the word faithfulness? Will he find anybody doing what he said to do when he comes back? The question is, why would he have told us to do stuff if he didn't expect us to do it? It's because he does expect us to do it. I would maintain that these instructions are here as the example of what we're supposed to look like if we're properly doing it, which includes the Sabbath day and festivals, doing justly and loving mercy. The Zodi then is the archetype, the quintessential, as it were, the perfect specimen of. Look at that, conform yourself to it. So here set before you, which is why this is in a triangle aspect, set before you is the role model of what you should look like as you're doing these three things: justice, doing justice, loving mercy, walking humbly with Him, which is the result of choosing death from death to go to life, learning the protocols, the instructions of the kingdom, believing the promises and behaving accordingly as you do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your Him, which looks like the Zodi, which the promise is that if you do this, you will sprout like Aaron's rod. You will be provided for like the manna. You will sprout, as it were, the wing from the caterpillar. This is the promise, the hope set before you in the set-apart place for doing these. And these four then are inside this separate place, which simply is the life that you live because you, the outside things, learn the instructions and believe the promises. And the ramifications of that we'll do next. We've got to change the tape.